In this lesson, we're going to be using Foley to enhance the realism of our cut. Let's take a look at the types of Foley that we'll be adding. We'll be adding more cloth movement. We already have some of this covered when we added our cloth grabs from the sound effects lesson, but now we're going to focus on making sure that all of the quick movements of the characters are supported by appropriate cloth Foley, like jackets flapping, sleeves rustling, and so on. And next, we'll be adding ground Foley like footsteps and body falls. And another element of Foley that we'll be layering in are the occasional air whooshes to give the impression of quick punches and kicks. And then last, we'll be adding human Foley, like grunts, some yells, heavy breathing, coughing, and groans. There are two key points to keep in mind as we're adding all this Foley. First, Foley sells the scene, but don't overuse it. The right amount of Foley will enhance the realism and give your scene texture and audible interest. However, too much Foley will feel artificial and will actually become distracting. The key is to find the right balance. And second, use production audio when possible. If your scene has good sound that was recorded on set, make use of it. It's going to make your job a lot easier and will be 100% true to life since it's the actual sound of the actors.
I'd also like to mention, this lesson covers a lot of editing tactics, and as a result is rather long. If you feel like you're ready to begin editing your own scene before the lesson's over, feel free to skip to the end, review your homework assignment, and get started editing. I promise, you won't hurt my feelings.
Alright, so the way that I'm going to do this video is rather than show you how to add the Foley to every single moment throughout the entire fight, which would be pretty tedious and take quite a while, I'm just going to kind of show you some of the key, most interesting moments where we're going to be adding the Foley. I'm going to try to show you a variety of different situations that you might encounter, ways to use all the different types of Foley that we discussed, so that you can kind of just get a sample platter, essentially, of the different scenarios that you might be encountering in your own editing. So as always, just basically just pay attention to this lesson. Don't worry about following along on your own quite yet. And then once the lesson's over, then you can go back through your cut and add all the Foley accordingly. So first things first, let's duplicate the sequence. We're going to go up to version 9, and I'm just going to call it Foley. And we'll load it up. All right. Now, we're starting to get kind of a lot of audio tracks here. And just tracks in general. And like we talked about in the last lesson, it's getting a little bit cramped on this one monitor with the with all the tracks. So it's going to start to get a little bit tough to see everything at the same time. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of decrease the size of all my existing tracks, with the exception of my timecode track, because I want to be able to see where we are. So I'm going to decrease all the sizes. We don't really need to see any of this information too closely. And if we need to, we can still kind of zoom in here and see where the punches are exactly falling and whatnot. So we can line up our Foley as needed. So then I'm going to go ahead and for Foley, I'm going to start by adding 4 new tracks. And if we need to add more later, we can. And I'm going to obviously make the tracks that we're working with for this lesson a little bit larger so you can see more easily what I'm doing. All right, and I'm going to label these. All right, so I'm just going to kind of start here at the beginning of the fight, and I'll show you a moment here where we're going to add just one piece of Foley to accent this a little bit more. So when Dan grabs Rollins' wrist, let me play for you what we currently have for that.
Wait. Hey.
So currently we have a bit of a cloth grab, we have a bit of a body hit, and then we have more cloth sounds as he pushes him away. So the only thing I'm going to add here, we're going to start easy, is just an effort grunt, a male effort grunt, as Dan moves forward to grab his wrist. And it's just going to show that there's a little bit of force behind it, and Dan is, he's reacting. So these bins that we were working with the last lesson from Hi-Fi and then the sound effects free bin, I'm just going to close those because we're not going to be working with them this lesson. And I'm going to open up the Foley bin again. Okay. So I'm going to sort or sift for grunts. And all right, so we have all our male effort grunts here. So basically we want Dan to go right before he grabs. So now On a lot of productions, you might be able to actually get your talent to read all this Foley, their own vocalizations for you, and just kind of, they can do an ADR session, it's called, automated dialogue replacement. And they can basically either replace actual dialogue that you can't hear too well, or they can create these vocalizations that you can then layer into the fight if they didn't actually make those sounds on the set. So the actual actor can sit here in a booth and record grunting, he can record pain and coughing and all these other things that you might need during the editing process. But if you don't have those things available to you, and we don't currently for this particular lesson, what you can do is there's plenty of free libraries out there where you can find grunts and things like this where it doesn't have to be identical to the actor, because it's pretty hard to tell the difference between one person grunting and another, unless their voices are vastly different. But with so many grunts here, we should be able to find something that sounds at least a little bit like Dan, and it won't be very distracting at all. So the one that I found that I thought was a pretty good replacement for Dan that felt good here was this one, Male Effort Grunt 20. So let's take a listen. It's pretty subtle, so it's going to be kind of hard to pick that out as being a different voice. So let's drop that in. All right. So the grunt should occur before the grabbing. Now I'm going to change the track color of our Foley tracks once again so that we can see what we're working with. And I'm going to go with like a orange color here. And I'm also going to increase the size of the waveform on these tracks so we can see that better too. All right, so you can see that the grabs and all those sounds happen here. So if the grunt happens a little bit before it, I think we'll be in good shape. We might need to jack up the volume on it. Yeah, I think we do. I'm gonna go up 4 dB.
Wait! Wait! Hey!
Okay, so that's nice. It's really subtle, but it's just something that adds a little bit more human involvement to the scene. All right, I'm going to skip some of this stuff, and I'm going to just move on to a different section here where I show you something that gets a little bit more advanced now. So now when Dan punches back. So when he punches back, let me show you what we currently have. Okay, so it sounds pretty good the way it is, right? You got some good body hits, got good punch sound effects, and then the actual actors in the production audio, you know, they made some grunting sounds as well, and they exerted some effort, and so you can hear that human involvement from the actual production tracks. So we don't have too much work to do here, but there is definitely some ways that we can sweeten it with Foley, and I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is when Dan punches back. So when Dan punches here to Rollins' chest, we're going to accent this a little bit more. It's a quick move that he makes, and it's pretty cool because he's reacting pretty fast considering he was just blindsided essentially by Rollins with that sucker punch. So it's a pretty cool, quick reaction back from Dan. So I want to accentuate how quick this is happening, and I also want to add a little bit more cloth sound to this since he's hitting his jacket. So the way we can do that is we can add a bit of an air whoosh. So I'm going to go down here, and we have them labeled as Swing Air. So check out this one, Swing Air 2. And that almost actually sounds like a cloth flap or a cloth whoosh as well, so that works really well for us. I'll just show you some of the other swing airs just so you get an idea what they sound like. So these are all great for making a fight move seem faster and more interesting than it actually might be. So let's try Swing Air 2. We're going to drop that in here. And that's going to occur as he's swinging, obviously, so it's going to occur slightly before the hit lands. So here. All right, and then we're also going to add a bit more of a cloth flap as well. So we've dealt with the cloth grabs. So a cloth flap is not too different from a cloth grab, but it's subtly different. So here's a grab. We dealt with those before, and they sound a little flappy too. But here's a cloth. Here's what I've decided to label as a cloth flap. So it's a little bit different, kind of splitting hairs, but we'll drop that in here. I'm going to use this cloth flap to kind of bridge the transition between the actual swing and then the contact being made with the body. So it just adds a nice rustle. It adds a little bit more realism to this because you can see the jacket's flying around, Dan's moving quick, there's a lot going on, and it just creates, it just grounds all these movements a little bit more. So let me just, I'm just going to show you an A-B comparison real quick, and then we'll move on. So this is what it was, again, this is what it was before we just added the cloth and the air whooshes. That's just with our key sound effects, our music, and our production audio. Alright, and then this is with our cloth flaps and our swinging air whooshes. So a little bit more texture, a little bit more realism. Alright, let's keep going. So I'm just going to actually kind of play out this section, and we're just going to flesh this whole thing out a little bit with Foley. This is one of the examples I'd like to dive into. So here, as TT comes in, and he comes to kick Dan. Now see, actually right here, we don't necessarily need effort grunts or pain grunts or anything. We don't need to add any more of those because we already have those from the actual actors. So we're letting the production audio do the work for us there. But what we could use here from TT is a nice big effort grunt. Since he's coming in, it looks like he's exerting a ton of effort. This kick's going to really hurt, but we don't really hear anything from TT as he's doing it. So I think this is something that we can improve with Foley. Let me just ISO this production audio and we can hear exactly what TT's doing. So you hear a little bit from him, but it certainly doesn't reflect the amount of effort he looks like he's putting into this. So let's go ahead and grab some male effort grunts. All right, so male effort grunt 25. It's a pretty good one. So we'll go ahead and we'll lay that in right before TT's kick. All right, that works well. So now we'll grab a pain grunt for Dan. And the one that I found to work really well, that sounded really like he was getting hit in the stomach, kind of a deep guttural loss of air and just groaning sound, was this male pain grunt 8. You can kind of tell, like it's hard to describe, but that sounds like something you might say if you got kicked in the stomach. So let's go ahead and we'll drop that in for Dan. Right around here. All right. And then the last thing I want to add to kind of flesh out this section with Foley is a little bit of a cough from Dan as the air gets knocked out of him. So we can go ahead and look at our coughing sounds. Coughing 3. Kind of like that. And we'll go ahead and we'll drop that in too. And I'm going to shorten this as well. I'm going to upcut this. I want that last little gasp or that little raspy thing to happen a little bit sooner. And I'm also going to lower these because they're it's a bit in your face. All right.
And, one last thing I think I might do to it, I might take out a little bit of the high end. And this is getting a little nitpicky for this stage, but I'm going to EQ these a little bit and just take out a little bit of this high end. Okay, great. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to get TT's punch to Dan here folied out a little bit more. So that's going to be another effort grunt from TT. Kind of a long one, I would hope for, because it looks like he's putting quite a bit of effort into this punch as well. Another pain grunt from Dan, and then we'll add a little bit of a whoosh to the whole thing, a swing air whoosh, and then we'll have a sound effect of Dan hitting the ground. So let's grab this effort grunt for TT. And this is the one that I liked for this particular section when I was looking through things. It's male effort grunt 28. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll drop that down. And I like it to be a little bit more drawn out than that. I like it to be a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do, and obviously your technique's going to vary depending on your software, but in Avid here, I'm going to use a time compression filter on this, and I'm actually going to slow down this sound effect. So if you want to do that in your own software at any point, obviously, you'll have to use your own tools. But in Avid, at least, I'm going to put the ratio about 1.6. So it's going to be about 160% of the time that it would take normally. All right, and we'll move that back a little bit. Great. All right, and then we'll get something for Dan to react in pain. Male pain grunt 6 was a good one. And it has a nice variety too, because you contrast that with the one that we just listened to when he got kicked in the stomach. This one's going to be quite a bit different, and it makes sense because he's being hit on a very different part of his body. So we'll drop this in here. And I might lower that a little bit for now. Okay, and then we'll just add our swing air for TT's arm coming through the air quickly to kind of heighten the sense of speed for that. Swing air 8 sounds pretty good, especially considering the loose jacket that TT's wearing. All right. And then last, we just need Dan hitting the ground. So we need a body fall. And we're going to use this body fall on concrete, which is pretty perfect sounding. Great. All right, so I'll go ahead and drop that in. You can see where the first impact occurs right here. So we'll find where he actually hits the ground, roughly. Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. All right, so let's take a quick listen to what we've done here. Cool. All right, and I'm just going to also show you a real quick before and after. So I'm going to mute all the new Foley that we just added and play it the way it was originally. Okay, and now here it is with the Foley that we just added. So a lot more realism, a lot more texture, interest, and it just generally feels fuller and like it's actually happening. So that's really what we're going for, and that's always kind of the goal of Foley. It's to fill in all the sounds that the human ear can pick up on when you're actually in a situation, but that may not actually get recorded by the sound production crew on a set because of various reasons. It's difficult to actually record all those little nuances. So that's why we tend to add them back in the Foley, just to kind of bring that level of realism back to the scene. All right, so that's that section. And I'm going to move on to a different section where there's a couple more interesting things to do with Foley that I think would be useful to show you. So this is the section where Dan locks up TT's leg and gets himself back up off the ground after those guys are kicking him, and then uppercuts mouth. Now this has always been kind of an interesting section because Dan's performing a move here that's a little bit difficult to see, and it is important because somehow he's gotten himself up off the ground and he's back in the fight. So what we've been using to show that Dan has actually performed something damaging to his opponent here has been a lot of sound. And currently we have a bone break and a body hit and a cloth grab that shows that Dan's doing a move here and he hurts TT's leg. So now, once we're adding this Foley, this is going to be a really good opportunity for us to most specifically add a pain grunt from TT to show that Dan really just hurt him. All right. So we'll just go in order of things that would be naturally occurring. So let's start with an effort grunt from Dan. Let's check out this one, male effort grunt 3. That might work. Yeah, 3's fine. Let's try that out. All right. So we'll drop it in right before he twists the leg. Maybe a little bit sooner. All right, that looks okay. So let's also add... I want to add a bit of a cloth flap. Something kind of sharp sounding that can really clue us in to that something's happening, that Dan's moving quick, that he's actually doing something. Because this is still all just a little bit subtle for me. Maybe that cloth flap 2. Actually, I think I like cloth flap 4 better. It's got a nice sharp attack to it. And I think we turn it up even more, actually. Yeah. Okay, great. So now let's add TT's pain grunt. So we'll go to male pain grunt, and we'll check out number 8. All right. Now we're going to do something kind of interesting here. That's the sound that I want. I mean, that's definitely something that, or the sound of somebody who's in a lot of pain, but it doesn't necessarily sound like TT. But I think that we can fix that by adjusting the pitch of this particular sound file. All right, so that's the right idea. It's just kind of the wrong quality of sound for TT's particular voice. So let's go ahead and what I'm going to do here in Avid is just pitch shift that particular pain grunt, and I'm just going to lower it a little bit so it sounds a little bit more like TT. Lower it by 3 semitones here in Avid. Now that sounds a bit more like TT, right? So just here we go, before and then after. Better. So that's always available to you, is pitch shifting things to kind of make it work for your scene. All right, now as TT hits the ground, we're going to add another body fall. So we'll go up to our body falls here. And I liked body fall 8 for this particular moment. It's a nice big thud as TT lands. So we'll drop that in there. It kind of looks like he's hitting the ground, maybe right around there. Yeah, it's subtle again, but it gets lost a little bit because there's other things happening, and I think these are Dan's shoes squeaking is what we're hearing here. Sounds like it. I guess it's wet. Yeah, it looks like it's wet here. But maybe we'll turn it up just a little bit, but we don't want to overpower everything else too much. Okay, that's fine. So let me show you what we just did here. We'll just do another before and after. So here's the before. Okay.
And obviously, we didn't do anything here with this mouth section here, but I would probably add another effort grunt from Dan, a pain grunt from mouth, and maybe even a swing air, since Dan's doing an uppercut, so you might want to hear a nice whoosh as Dan swings up and hits him. But, you know, I'm not going to show you how to do everything since that's kind of obvious. But I thought this section was important to show. So here it is again, before. And then here it is after. A little bit better, a little bit more clearly defined that Dan's doing a move on TT. And we did that all with Foley, mostly with this pain grunt thing and a little bit of effort sounding from Dan. All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit now. And we're going to go to the section here where Dan gets grabbed from behind by TT. So, let me show you here, sorry. All right, so Dan, just to keep things linear. So TT kicks Dan in the back here. He picks him back up. Dan locks up his arm, throws him to the ground, fights a bit with Mouth and Rollins. And then once he gets Rollins pushed away, then TT comes up behind him again. So let me play for you what we've currently done in this particular section here. And then I'll talk about a little bit about what we're going to add to it.
Come here, you piece of...
All right, so it sounds pretty good the way it is. But what I think would be good to add Foley-wise in this section where TT comes up and grabs his jacket, or grabs him around his jacket. So currently we have a cloth grab working for us, which is good. It shows that there's a move occurring and it sounds realistic. But there's a lot of cloth on cloth rustling and stuff like that we should be hearing if TT's basically bear hugging Dan and they both have all these heavy jackets on. So I think we need to add a lot of cloth sound with Foley in this section. And then we also need to add a bit of effort and pain and those types of grunts going on. But let's start off with the jacket grab here. All right, so we currently have a good cloth grab, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and add an effort grab, or an effort grunt, as TT is approaching Dan here. So I'm going to grab male effort grunt 4. I'm going to drop that down. Line it up right before he grabs. All right, so this is tricky. So he's actually... So this isn't actually going to work. We're not going to be able to add an effort grab, at least not in this location for TT, because he's speaking. So he can't be grunting and speaking at the same time. So that's a good kind of learning point. It's pretty obvious, but sometimes you can get carried away with your Foley, and it can definitely kill your realism just because it doesn't logically make sense how it's happening. But what we could do maybe, I don't know if this is going to sound weird or what, but we could maybe try putting the effort grunt from TT as if he's lunging maybe before he actually starts speaking. Let's see how that sounds. No, that doesn't work. So let's just get rid of the effort grunt. All right, so now what we can maybe do here is we can maybe add, just go with the cloth grabbing and the rustling, and perhaps even some quick footsteps from TT approaching Dan. So let's start with the obvious, the cloth grabs, or the cloth rustles. So we already have cloth grab 10 here. Let's see if there's any other grab sounds that could be used to accentuate the actual contact between the two of them. Yeah, that's a good one, cloth grab 9. There's a lot going on there. And there's a nice kind of whoosh tied to it as well. All right, it's a little loud. We'll lower that. But it's already starting to fill this section out a bit. Lower it even more. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds better. More realistic. All right. Now let's check out some of the cloth rustles. We haven't used any of these yet. These are pretty cool. Perfect for this situation because there's a lot of cloth rustling going on.
So let's see how this sounds if we just kind of layer it in. I think that works pretty good. So I'm just going to let the cloth rustles actually play out all the way up until the end of the sound file, which is pretty much about the same time that you would stop hearing the cloth rustling. So we'll just leave that as is. And then what we can add for sure, we can add is a little bit of vocalization from Dan. So maybe TT can't do his effort grunt, but Dan can probably react a little bit audibly, perhaps with some pain or some shock or a gasp or his own effort or something like that. So let's see what we can add for that. All right, so after listening to almost every pain grunt, I think pain grunt 1 is kind of the sound that we're looking for. It's just a little bit of a painful reaction, but it's nothing too extreme because it's not like he's getting punched or kicked or anything. So pain grunt 1, we'll drop that in. I'm going to lower it. And keep in mind this is for Dan, so it's going to need to sound a bit like Dan. Alright, and we probably want to hear it occurring right as TT finishes the full grab here. And since Dan's mouth isn't completely, it's not really moving here, we wouldn't want it to start until his mouth is obscured, which is probably about here, where we can start seeing where the motion blur starts happening. Alright, and I might even lower the pitch on this sound for Dan as well. We might not need it, but I think we can probably get it to sound a little bit more realistic for Dan. Go down like 4 or 5 semitones, see what it sounds like. Especially if Dan's mouth is closed and he's supposed to be grunting or wincing in pain with his mouth closed, it would be a deeper sound. Yeah, I think that works pretty good. Alright, so now let's add something to when, a little bit of effort to when Dan twists TT's arm in preparation to knee him in the face. So we'll look for a male effort grunt for Dan now. Sounds good. Male effort grunt 11. You can see that a big part of this Foley stuff, it really centers around a lot of cloth movement in this particular scene because of the fight and their clothing. And it really also centers around a lot of male, not necessarily male, but human vocalizations, pain and effort and all that. If you had a different scene that you were working with and it was a foot chase or it was a car chase or something like that, the Foley that you would be adding would obviously be quite different, but it would be a lot of the same stuff again. Like if you had a foot chase, you'd be adding a lot of footstep Foley. You'd probably be adding a lot of body falls as people were jumping around and moving. But in our particular case, it's a lot of human vocalizations and effort and clothing. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit. This effort grunt from Dan. Move it down a little bit right before he twists the arm. We already have a pretty good cloth sound going on in here, but let's see if we can even add a little bit more to it with another flap sound. I'm going to try this cloth flap 4. So it looks like we are going to need another track for Foley, or another 2 tracks perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead and add those. We're kind of running out of space here. All right. And I'll make sure that they're all this orange color, just so it's easy to follow along. All right, great. Okay. And now we'll add a pain grunt. And we could add a pain grunt as Dan twists TT's arm here.
'cause there's not too much in the production audio. But our big pain grunt is going to be, we're going to want it pretty much after Dan knees TT in the face. So we don't want to upstage that with something that occurs before it. So if we can find something that works well, then that's a little bit subtle, we'll add it. If not, we'll just leave it empty, and we'll add the big grunt from TT here when he gets kneed in the face. So actually, as a matter of fact, let's work to that. So let's add this knee pain grunt first from TT, and then we'll work backwards. So that one that I just played was pretty good, that male pain grunt 5. So I'm going to drop that in here for TT. Move it down. It's going to have to be lowered. Maybe too much. Okay. All right. I think we can probably find something that'll sound good there for the pain grunt now for the arm twist. Maybe pain grunt 9, and then we'll just lower it, or we'll drop the pitch on it. It's a bit loud. Nice. It's subtle, and but it shows that there's a reaction from TT, so that's good. All right, now a couple other things that we want to add in this section here. I want to add a little bit of a cloth flap from Dan as he initiates his kick, and then I also want to add an air whoosh as his knee flies through the air and comes up to TT's face. And then that'll complete this little section here that we're working on. So let's find a cloth flap real quick. Try cloth flap 2 for Dan's leg. Okay. And then we'll get an air whoosh that precedes this contact right here. So we'll use this swing air. We'll try... Got to be careful these don't get too cartoony. It's really easy to do. Just going to use the swing air too. I think I've already used it before, and I know I'm definitely going to be using it again. But when it's layered with everything, it's kind of hard to pick out the fact that you're using the same swing air whoosh. Move it back a little bit. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so let me just show you a quick before and after of this section here now, where we added a lot of cloth sounds. We added a lot of grunting and pain. So I'm gonna mute all of the sounds that we just added and show you the original, and then I'll show you the after.
Come here, you piece of shit.
All right, so that's before. One more time.
Come here, you piece of shit.
Okay, and then here's the after.
Come here, you piece of shit.
And one more time.
Come here, you piece of shit.
Cool. So a lot more realistic. Again, the Foley's really doing a good job for us. All right, now there's one last section I want to walk you through and show you a couple examples. of the of how the Foley can help us out before I'm going to leave you to finish it up on your own. All right, so it's this section here where Dan gets hit over the head with the bottle. Now in this section, it's going to be a little bit interesting because we have some slow-mo stuff going on, so we have to account for that. And we also, Dan is really kind of down for the count for a moment here. So we're going to use coughing. And coughing is a really useful effect to use sometimes during a fight to indicate an injured person. So coughing, groans, things like that. So we're going to add a bit of coughing for Dan to show that he's recovering. And we're also going to treat our sounds, the Foley that we're going to add, a little bit with some cool kind of filters and sound designy type things to give this section a little bit of style, even though it's just Foley. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll dive right into it. All right, so we're going to start simple. So as TT comes over here to Dan and hits him in the head with a bottle, we're going to add an effort grunt for TT. So let's grab a quick a male effort grunt for TT as he comes in with the bottle. I liked number 26. Right, and we might need to lower that a little bit. I'm going to decrease the volume a bit. I'm also going to pitch it down a little bit. And I'm also going to have it fade in from 0 since we're coming out of a slow-mo effect here. Okay. Cool. So now what we're going to add here, the interesting thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of a pain grunt from Dan as he gets hit with this bottle. But this is so stylized that it can't be your typical pain grunt. So here's what we're going to do. Let's grab pain grunt number 2. I'm going to drop it down. Okay. Now, first thing we're going to do, because currently, obviously, that doesn't look or sound good. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower it. And what we've done here with our picture is we've done a repetition of the action for effect. So we're going to kind of do the same thing with our audio. But what we're going to do, since everything's kind of in slow-mo here, is we're going to put an echo, a deverb on this audio. So the way that you would accomplish this in your software editing program is probably going to be different than mine. But essentially what I'm going to do in Avid is I'm going to do a mix down. I'm going to basically take this section and I'm just going to have it ring out. So it's going to have a lot of echo. It's going to be about 3 times longer than it normally would. And then I'm going to repeat it 2 or 3 times. So if you're in Avid, you can go ahead and use the same technique that I'm using. And if you're not, then you'll just need to use the technique that's offered by your software program to accomplish this. All right, so this is the first time I'm actually going to be creating junk media here in Avid. So I'm just going to create another bin, and I'm just going to call it junk. Everybody needs a junk bin, right? I guess there's no real home for that, so I'll just let it hang loose there. All right. So in Avid, just in case you're interested, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a mono mix down of my sound effect plus some of the filler that comes after it. And that's going to create a new piece of audio. And you can see what it does is it's a piece of audio now that actually contains the filler as part of it. So it's automatically pan left here, so we'll need to center pan that. But now in Avid, at least, what I can do is I can add an echo to this, and it has all this room to echo out. And here, it wouldn't have had any room to echo out. And I'm going to let it fade out also. And I'm actually going to get, well, I'll probably end up getting rid of our original piece of audio here because it's a little bit too realistic sounding for how stylized this is. But I'll leave it for now. But we'll probably end up deleting that and just only using the echoed material. All right, and each time it occurs, I'm going to lower the volume of it quite substantially. And I am going to just get rid of our original grunt. I think I lowered it too much here. Let's see if we can still hear it. All right. Okay, and I'm going to echo it a third time to kind of mirror the third time that we see Dan getting hit. So we see 1, 2, 3. He doesn't really get hit a third time here, but it's a third kind of take on the whole thing. And obviously I'll want them to be kind of evenly spaced. And the third one I'll lower even more. Okay, great. So that's kind of cool. That's a neat effect that we just added. And once we get the sound design in here and all that, I think it's going to nicely blend with all this. But, you know, as always, it's a kind of a work in progress with editing, and some things are experimental. And I can kind of tell that this is going to work well, and I'm thinking that we're going to probably end up leaving this. But if once we add all the sound design and everything, if this ends up actually sounding a little bit cheesy, obviously we can just take it out. But I think it's going to sound pretty cool with some hits and some whooshes and some ring outs layered on top of all this. All right. So let's add just a little bit of coughing here so I can kind of show you the effect that creates. And then I'll leave you to it, and you can start doing all the Foley on your own. So I'm just going to search here for coughing. All right. That's a bit much. Maybe this last part of it. Let's see what else we got. Okay. This is fun. All right, let's drop in this coughing, the tail end of this coughing 1 here, and see how that works for us. The beginning of it was just way too much, and I'm going to lower it quite a bit. All right, and then we'll just add a little bit more coughing. We'll add coughing 3 here as well. Probably just the tail end of that as well, because we don't want anything too over the top for this section. And we'll lower that also. Okay. All right, that works pretty good. I think one thing, this whole area, to be honest with you right now, sounds really empty, and it's really hard to kind of do this Foley right now without it feeling a little bit fuller in here, which is what we're going to get once we add our sound design. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish adding all this Foley on my own, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so let's take a look at the scene with all of the Foley added.
You got our money now, just leave us alone.
Get in the fucking warehouse, motherfucker. Now. Wait. Hey. Oh.
Come here.
All right, it's looking pretty good. Now, for your homework, you'll want to go through and layer in the Foley sounds into your cut that you think work well in the scene. And as always, use the cheat sheet if you get stuck. I've listed out all the different Foley effects that I used in my cut, so you can use the same ones in your cut if you like. Coming up, we'll be adding a few wild lines or pieces of flavor dialogue from the different characters to enhance the scene's emotional intensity and to help direct the story throughout the scene. Alright, I'll see you in a bit.